This is the growth strategist, Ambler. I want to talk to you about analysis paralysis. Where does it come from? How do you prevent it? And how do you even recognize if it's happening to your team? All right, I'll tell you a few stories. When it comes time for a leadership team to look at some significant changes, it really does pay to do some research. Let's say some of the changes are organizational structure, or maybe a business model change, or the leadership shift, or even mission statement. Now, that's not small stuff. So it really pays to pause. Don't just jump into an implementation. It pays to do some research. Now, on the other hand, that research needs to be done in a focused way and in a timely way, because if it gets stretched out, it can do some damage. I mean, a team that's susceptible to some perfectionism, or a leader who tends to worry, or even just busy schedules can stretch research out way beyond, and it becomes almost an end in and of itself. And research is not a goal in and of itself, unless you're a research company. So why is that a problem? Now think about it. For one thing, the world's changing so fast, and consumer buying habits are changing so fast, and business-to-business buying habits are changing so fast. You take too long to do your research, it's going to be out of date by the time you get the report. That's a really important reason. Pick it up, pick up the speed. Hit the basic patterns rather than get in the weeds so far. Plus, I've noticed that when research goes on too long, it builds doubt on the part of the executives. They start wondering if they're ever going to do some changes. The management team, managers behind the executives, start wondering, are we ever going to change? Are we ever going to make up our minds? I'm tired of talking about it. And if the research takes too long, sometimes the challenges that are surfaced during research, they start to seem too big. They get larger and larger in the minds of executives, particularly during a recession when you're a little worried about cash or risk-taking. You get too much information from research, you start panicking. I mean, I've seen people that used to be confident lose their sense of confidence. And by the time the research report happens, if it's taken too long and proposals are presented, the leadership team can act disillusioned or disinterested or even bored. And, it's like, yeah, this is old news. We've talked about this. And you don't want that kind of tired reaction. I've seen a tired leadership team become so tempted to settle with kind of simple strategies or go back to what used to be comfortable and kind of forget the compelling reasons why they were looking at significant changes or considering the research in the first place. That's not good. I've seen bright, capable people freeze from what I call analysis paralysis, because that's what that's about. We've been brought in, frankly, to help dozens of companies where their leadership team needs to recover from analysis paralysis. It happens sometimes when a mid-sized company brings in a great big firm. I'm not going to name any names, but they go in, the consultants almost overcomplicate the research to being so thorough, and it's expensive, and you get this great big tome, and by the time you get the big, document, however fancy it's presented, it shuts you down. If research doesn't open you up and help you make decisions more quickly, it's not serving a purpose. It's not serving you well. Let me tell you 4 stories. In one company that we came in and we were helping them with analysis paralysis, in a way it helped them because the executives, the owners, the board could see they didn't have the right president, because he let that research go on too long, and he was a fretter and he was a worrier. Ooh. So they needed to change at the top, and in that case it actually helped, but that's kind of a bad side effect. I'd like them to have seen that they needed a different president, a different way, a less expensive way. Second company decided what they were going to do is they did a do-over of last year's strategy session, because then they could revisit, why were they looking at changes, and what were the proposed approaches and strategies, and see if they still fit now that they had all that new information based on the research. Now, in their case, they recommitted to the strategy, because fortunately it was still applied a year later. It was still powerful. It was the right thing to do. But they also had to have a parallel problem-solving process to make sure they prevented falling into analysis paralysis ever again, because it's dysfunctional. It's too expensive. A third company quietly got together. In other words, the executive team sat together and they were candid with one another. And it turns out that some of the executives were not as ambitious for their company as they used to be. In fact, they're kind of tired. And a few of them were ready for retirement, and they had not admitted it the previous year. So they increased their focus on succession planning so that the strategy could be successful. You can have a fabulous strategy, but if the people are tired or disinterested or not as ambitious at the top, if they're not enthusiastic about it, it's sabotaged right from the beginning. Wow. And a fourth company had gotten so tired from their research, they decided that they would kind of coast. They would go back to what was comfortable. They would simplify their to-do lists. And they kind of ducked dealing with the fact that they'd spent all that money and time. You know what happened to them? The next 6 months, they experienced pretty high turnover. The ambitious managers behind them got disillusioned and left. Are you at risk of analysis paralysis? The recession causes it. People are trying to analyze the situation. They're afraid of risk, being careful, trying to anticipate the problems. You can lose your enthusiasm and your momentum and the joy of being in business if you overdo research. Just making you think. This is the growth strategist, Ambler, with your tip of the week.